Yuki Tanaka was 12 years old when the sky turned green over Jakarta. She remembered standing on the roof of the refugee shelter, holding her grandmother's hand, watching the clouds swirl with poison. The air tasted like metal. People were coughing blood in the streets below. The news said humanity had maybe 5 years left, maybe less. Then the ships came. They were beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Long and silver, shaped like leaves falling through water. They blocked out the sun for 3 days as they positioned themselves around the planet. Nobody knew what they wanted. Some people prayed. Some people screamed. Most people just waited to die. But death never came. Instead, the Velcari came down from their ships. They were tall beings made of light and something like glass. When they moved, colors rippled under their skin like oil on water. They did not speak with mouths. They spoke directly into minds, gentle voices that felt like warm rain. They said they had been watching. They said they could help. And then, without asking for anything in return, they gave humanity the technology to clean the sky. It took 10 years. 10 years of machines humming in every city, pulling poison from the air and water and soil. 10 years of the Velcari working beside human scientists, teaching them how to heal their dying world. And when it was done, when Earth could breathe again, the Velcari simply said goodbye. They left behind one gift, a communication device that would let humanity speak with the Galactic Concord, the great gathering of species that watched over this part of the universe. Then their silver ships rose into the sky and disappeared among the stars. That was 30 years ago. Yuki Tanaka was no longer a frightened child on a rooftop. She was 73 years old, and she served as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Concord. Her office floated in a station between Mars and Jupiter, surrounded by diplomats from 100 different worlds. She had learned to read the body language of beings with no bodies. She had negotiated trade deals with species that communicated through smell. She had seen wonders that her grandmother could never have imagined. But she had never forgotten the Velcari. She had never forgotten watching them save her world and ask for nothing. So when the emergency transmission came, her heart stopped. The message was simple. The Velcari homeworld, a planet they called Sanctuary Prime, was dying. Something called the Hollow Blight had been growing inside their planet for centuries. It was a kind of crystal that ate heat. It fed on the fire at the center of their world, and it was winning. The Velcari scientists had tried everything they knew. Nothing worked. They had perhaps 40 years before their planet went cold and dark forever. Yuki read the message 3 times. Then she requested an emergency session of the Galactic Concord. The great chamber was full of beings from across the galaxy. There were the Moorish, who looked like floating clouds of purple gas. There were the Kethrani, armored creatures with too many legs. There were the Elders, ancient beings who had been traveling the stars when humanity was still learning to use fire. They all listened as the Velcari representative, a being called Fading Light, explained the situation. When Fading Light finished, there was silence. Then the Elders spoke. They expressed sympathy. They said the Hollow Blight was known to them. It had destroyed other worlds before. There was no cure. The Velcari had their condolences, but nothing could be done. Other species agreed. The Moorish offered to help relocate Velcari refugees. The Kethrani suggested preserving their cultural artifacts. Everyone was very sorry. Everyone had already given up. Yuki stood. Her old bones ached, but her voice was strong. She asked if anyone planned to actually try saving Sanctuary Prime. The chamber went quiet. Several beings made sounds that translated to confusion. The elder speaker gently explained that some problems had no solutions. The Velcari themselves had accepted this. It was sad, but it was true. Yuki looked at Fading Light. The Velcari's inner light was dim, barely visible through their glass-like skin. They had already begun to grieve. Yuki told the Concorde that 30 years ago, humanity was dying. Earth was poison. Everyone had accepted that too. But the Velcari did not accept it. They helped anyway. She said humanity would not accept this either. 2 weeks later, Earth's United Council held its own vote. For the first time in human history, every nation agreed on something. Every government, every faction, every political party voted yes. Earth would commit everything it had to saving Sanctuary Prime. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, miners, doctors, anyone who wanted to help could volunteer. The call went out, and the volunteers came. Marcus Chen was 29 years old. He was a geologist who had spent his career studying rocks deep underground. He had never been to space. He had never met an alien. But his grandmother had grown up in a small village in China, and when the skies turned poison, Velcari medics had come to her village. They had treated the sick. They had held the hands of the dying. One of them had carried young Lin Chun through the smoke when she was too weak to walk. Marcus had grown up hearing these stories. He had grown up knowing that his grandmother, his mother, and he himself only existed because of Velcari kindness. When the call for volunteers came, he did not hesitate. He joined 10,000 others on the transport ships heading for Sanctuary Prime. They were scientists and engineers, miners and doctors, soldiers and teachers. They came from every country on Earth. They spoke different languages. They believed different things. But they all knew the same truth. Someone had helped humanity once. Someone had saved them when no one else would. And now it was time to pay that debt. As the transport ship left Earth's orbit, Marcus looked out the window at the blue and green planet below. The skies were clear. The oceans were clean. Children played in parks where his grandmother had choked on poison air. The Velcari had given them all of this. Now humanity would give it back. The journey to Sanctuary Prime took 3 months. Marcus spent the time studying everything known about the Hollow Blight. It was not much. The crystal organism was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. It lived in extreme heat. It grew slowly but unstoppably. It adapted to every attack within hours. The Velcari had been fighting it for 300 years, and they had never won a single battle. When the transport ships finally arrived at Sanctuary Prime, Marcus understood why the galaxy had given up. The planet was beautiful and terrible. Its surface was covered in forests that glowed with soft light, cities that floated on clouds of energy, oceans that sang with colors humans had no names for. But beneath all that beauty, something was wrong. The ground trembled constantly. Great cracks had opened in the mountains, leaking cold air from below. The Velcari who greeted the human ships moved slowly, their inner lights flickering. Their world was dying from the inside out. Everyone could feel it. Marcus stepped off the transport and felt the ground shake beneath his feet. A Velcari approached him, light rippling through their glass-like form. They introduced themselves as Shimmering Tide, chief scientist of the Sanctuary Prime Geological Survey. Shimmering Tide looked at Marcus with eyes that had seen centuries of failure. They asked why humans had come. They asked what humans thought they could do that 300 years of Velcari science could not. Marcus did not have a good answer. He only knew that his grandmother was alive because of Velcari kindness. He only knew that giving up was not something humans did well. He told Shimmering Tide that he did not know if they could win, but he knew they would try. They would try until they succeeded or until they died trying. Shimmering Tide was quiet for a long moment. Then they made a sound that humans would learn meant sad amusement. They said that was very human. Then they led Marcus into the dying world. The research station floated in orbit above Sanctuary Prime. From its windows, Marcus could see the planet turning slowly below. During the day, The surface glowed with the soft light of Velcari cities. At night, he could see the dark lines spreading across the continents. Those were the cracks. Those were the places where the hollow blight was killing the world from within. He had been working on the problem for 6 months. He had learned more about Velcari science than any human before him. He had studied their records going back 3 centuries, and he was starting to understand why everyone had given up. The hollow blight was not like any enemy humanity had ever faced. It was not a disease that could be cured. It was not an invader that could be fought. It was more like a force of nature, like trying to stop a glacier or hold back the tide. The crystal organism lived deep inside the planet, feeding on the heat of the core. It grew slowly, spreading through rock like ice forming in water. Every year it consumed a little more heat. Every year the planet got a little colder. The Velcari had tried poison, radiation, extreme temperatures, sonic weapons, and 100 other things. Nothing worked. The blight adapted to everything. Marcus sat in the research lab, surrounded by holographic displays showing data from deep scan probes. Across from him, Shimmering Tide studied the same data with eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. They had been working together for months now. At first, the cultural differences had been difficult. The Velcari approached problems with patience and careful thought. They believed in finding elegant solutions that worked with nature rather than against it. They took their time. They did not rush. Humans approached problems differently. Marcus remembered the day the first drilling team arrived from Earth. They had brought massive machines designed to bore through solid rock. They wanted to drill straight down to the blight and attack it directly. The Velcari scientists had been horrified. Such violence against the planet went against everything they believed. The drilling team went ahead anyway. The first attempt failed. The blight sensed the intrusion and grew faster, surrounding the drill shaft within hours. 3 human volunteers died when the tunnel collapsed. Marcus had watched the rescue teams bring up the bodies. He had expected the humans to stop, to reconsider, to be more careful. The next day, more volunteers arrived. They brought bigger drills. Shimmering Tide had asked Marcus why humans did this. Why did they keep trying after failure? Why did they not accept that some things could not be changed? Marcus had tried to explain. He told Shimmering Tide about human history. He talked about the wars humans had fought against impossible odds. He talked about diseases humans had cured after centuries of failure. He talked about the way humans had nearly destroyed their own planet and then refused to let it die. Shimmering Tide listened. Then they asked a question that Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. They asked what humans called it when they did something specifically, because someone said it could not be done. Marcus thought for a moment. Then he smiled and said the word was spite. Shimmering Tide made the sound that meant confusion. They asked if spite was not a negative emotion. Marcus agreed that it could be. But he explained that humans had learned to use spite as fuel. When someone told a human that something was impossible, it made them want to do it more. It was not logical. It was not elegant. But it worked. Shimmering Tide was quiet for a long time. Then they said that this explained much about human history. The months passed. The experiments continued. Most of them failed. But slowly, the human and Velcari scientists began to learn from each other. The Velcari taught the humans to think in longer time scales, to see patterns that took centuries to form. The humans taught the Velcari to take risks, to try things that seemed impossible, just to see what would happen. One day, a young human scientist named Rebecca discovered something strange. She had been playing music in her lab while running tests on blight samples. When a jazz song came on, the crystals had reacted. They had vibrated in strange patterns. For just a moment, they had stopped growing. Rebecca ran the test again. She tried different kinds of music. Classical did nothing. Rock did nothing. Pop did nothing. But jazz, especially the chaotic improvisational kind with no clear pattern, disrupted the blight's growth for several minutes. Marcus stared at the data in disbelief. 300 years of Velcari science, and the answer involved human jazz music. Shimmering Tide studied the results with equal confusion. They asked why discordant sound would affect a crystal organism. Marcus did not know. Nobody knew. But it worked, at least a little, and that was more than anyone had achieved in 3 centuries. The discovery spread quickly through the research station. Human scientists began testing other things that were chaotic, unpredictable, without pattern. They found that the blight reacted badly to several human inventions, certain radio frequencies, irregular electromagnetic pulses, and the thermal signatures of human-made nuclear reactions. It was not a solution, but it was a start. Ambassador Tanaka traveled to the Galactic Concord to request help. She stood before the Great Assembly of Species and reported what humanity had learned. She asked for resources for scientists for anything the galaxy could spare. The elders listened politely. Then they refused. The methods humanity was using were too chaotic, too dangerous. They could damage the planet further. The risk was too great. Yuki did not argue. She simply nodded and returned to Sanctuary Prime. But something unexpected happened. Over the following weeks, ships began arriving at the research station. They were not official vessels. They were private ships, carrying volunteers from 16 different species. The Moorish sent atmospheric scientists. The Kethrani sent engineers who specialized in underground construction. Even 3 young elders arrived, defying their own leaders to help. When Marcus asked one of the Moorish volunteers why they had come, the floating cloud of purple gas made a sound like laughter. They said they had watched humanity refuse to give up for 2 years. They said it was either inspiring or insane. They said they wanted to see how the story ended. The research station grew crowded with beings from across the galaxy. Languages mixed in the corridors. Different species learned to work together, combining their knowledge in ways that had never been tried before. The Velcari, who had faced their extinction alone for so long, found themselves surrounded by friends they had never expected. Shimmering Tide came to Marcus one evening as he watched the planet turn below. The Velcari's inner light was brighter than it had been in months. They said they had not believed humanity could change anything. They said they had accepted death for themselves and their people. But watching humans refuse to accept that death had taught them something. Marcus asked what they had learned. Shimmering Tide was quiet for a moment. Then they said they had learned that acceptance was not always wisdom. Sometimes acceptance was just giving up with better words. Marcus smiled. He said that sounded like something a human would say. Shimmering Tide made the sound that meant amusement. They said that was the problem. They said they were starting to think like humans. Then they said something that Marcus would carry with him forever. They said that thinking like humans might be the only thing that could save their world. Below them, Sanctuary Prime continued to turn. The dark cracks were spreading. The planet was still dying. But in the research station above, humans and Velcari and a dozen other species worked through the night, refusing to accept the impossible. They did not have a solution yet, but they had something more important. They had spite. They had hope. And they had each other. That would have to be enough. The plan was insane. Everyone agreed on that. The humans thought it was brilliant. The Velcari thought it was suicide. Both were probably right. Marcus stood before the Combined Research Council, holographic displays floating around him showing the details of what they were proposing. Behind him, scientists from 12 different species watched in silence. The plan was called Planetary Surgery. They would drill 12,000 shafts into the planet's crust, reaching down toward the core where the hollow blight lived. Through these shafts, they would pump thermal siphons, machines designed to steal heat faster than the blight could consume it. At the same time, they would broadcast the disruptive frequencies through every shaft, creating a web of chaos that would prevent the blight from adapting if everything worked perfectly. They would starve the blight and shatter its structure at the same time. If anything went wrong, they would crack the planet open like a Nash. Egdok, the Velcari scientists, calculated the odds of success at 3.7%. The human scientists calculated them at 12% and called that workable. The debate lasted for 3 days. Velcari elders argued that the risk was too great. Better to spend their remaining years in peace than to destroy their world in a failed gamble. Human engineers argued that dying slowly was not peace. It was just slow death. In the end, the Velcari government made a decision that surprised everyone. They said yes. Fading light. The same Velcari who had announced their world's doom to the Galactic Concord spoke for their people. They said the Velcari had spent 300 years accepting their fate. They said it had brought them nothing but sorrow. They said that if their world was going to die, they would rather die fighting beside their friends than die alone in quiet. Acceptance. The operation began. Ships arrived from Earth carrying drilling equipment, thermal siphons, and thousands more volunteers. Velcari cities emptied as their people evacuated to orbital stations. The ground teams worked around the clock, setting up drilling sites across the planet. Marcus found himself leading Site 7, a drilling location in the mountains north of the largest Velcari city. His team included humans, Velcari, and a handful of Kathrani engineers, whose multiple legs proved useful in the uneven terrain. They drilled through rock that had stood for millions of years. They installed equipment designed in laboratories only months ago. They worked while the ground shook beneath them and cold air rose from cracks that grew wider every day. And they played jazz. Every drilling site had speakers broadcasting discordant human music into the depths. The Velcari found it unpleasant. The humans found it energizing. The blight found it confusing, which was the whole point. 6 months into the drilling operation, disaster struck. A blight surge, larger than anything recorded before, erupted in Sector 12. The crystalline organism burst through the rock with terrifying speed, collapsing tunnels and swallowing equipment. 400 workers were trapped miles below the surface. Humans, Velcari, and others, cut off from rescue by a wall of hungry crystal. Standard rescue was impossible. The blight was actively growing toward the trapped workers. Any rescue team that entered would be consumed along with them. Marcus watched the situation displays with growing horror. He could see the life signs of the trapped workers. He could watch them slowly running out of air. And he could do nothing. Then a woman named Sofia Reyes stepped forward. Sofia was an engineer from Brazil. She was 34 years old and had spent 10 years designing experimental boring vehicles for deep mining on Earth. She had a plan. The plan involved taking an untested, prototype vehicle through active blight territory, navigating by thermal signature alone, and cutting a path to the trapped workers before the blight could react. The journey would take 8 hours. The vehicle's hull could withstand blight contact for maybe 12. The Velcari classified the plan as suicide. Sofia said she was going anyway. Marcus tried to stop her. He told her the numbers did not work. He told her she would die before reaching the trapped workers. He told her that sacrificing one life to fail at saving 400 was not heroism. It was waste. Sofia looked at him with calm eyes. She said she knew the numbers. She said she was going anyway. She said that down in those tunnels, trapped in the dark, 400 people were waiting for rescue. Some of them were probably praying. Some of them were probably crying. All of them were hoping that someone would try to save them. She said she would rather die trying than live knowing she had not. Marcus had no answer for that. Sophia climbed into the prototype vehicle. It was an ugly machine, all drills and armor and emergency systems. She sealed the hatch and began the descent into darkness. For 18 hours, everyone watched her progress on the displays. She moved through rock and crystal, her vehicle's hull slowly being eaten by the blight. She narrated her journey into a recorder, describing what she saw, what she felt, what she was thinking. She talked about her family in Brazil. She talked about why she had volunteered. She talked about the Velcari medic who had treated her when she first arrived on Sanctuary Prime. How gentle they had been. How kind. At hour 16, her hull integrity dropped below safe levels. Crystal was growing inside the vehicle itself. She kept going. At hour 17, she lost navigation. She was drilling blind, following only the fading life signs of the trapped workers. She kept going. At hour 18, she broke through. The rescue footage became legend. Sophia's vehicle, half consumed by blight crystal, drilling into the trapped chamber. The workers inside, human and Velcari and others, staring in disbelief as the hatch opened. Sophia stepping out, her suit covered in crystal fragments, smiling. She had made it. Against all odds, against all logic, she had made it. The rescue took another 6 hours. They had to move fast, carrying wounded workers through the tunnel Sophia had cut before the blight could close it. They lost 11 people in the evacuation, but 389 survived. Sophia survived too, though the crystal fragments in her lungs would never fully heal. She did not seem to mind. When Marcus visited her in the medical bay, she was laughing with the Velcari elder she had rescued, teaching him a human card game called poker. The elder asked Sophia why she had come, why she had risked everything for strangers. Sophia dealt the cards and thought for a moment. Then she said that they were not strangers. She said that down in that tunnel, waiting to die, there were people who had helped save her planet. There were people who had left their homes to work beside humans on a crazy plan to save their world. There were people who had trusted humanity when nobody else would. She said, "You do not abandon people who trust you." Not ever. The Velcari elder was quiet for a long time. Then he made the sound that meant deep respect. He said that in 3,000 years of Velcari history, they had never met a species like humanity. Sophia smiled and told him to check his cards. She said he was about to learn another human tradition. She took all his money. Word of Sophia's rescue spread across the planet and beyond. Other species heard the story and sent more volunteers. The Galactic Concord officially condemned the operation as reckless, but quietly, their members sent resources anyway. The drilling continued. The thermal siphons were installed. The deadline approached. In 3 months, they would attempt the full operation. 12,000 sites activating at once. 72 hours of continuous operation. Either they would save the planet or they would destroy it. Marcus stood at his drilling site, watching the sun set over the Velcari mountains. Shimmering Tide stood beside him. They asked Marcus if he was afraid. Marcus admitted he was terrified. Shimmering Tide made the sound that meant understanding. They said they were terrified too. But they said they were also something else. Something they had not felt in centuries. Marcus asked what that was. Shimmering Tide looked at the sky, at the stars where ships from a dozen species waited to help. They said they felt hope. 50 years had passed since the Hollow Blight died. Elena Chun stood on the observation deck of the Concorde station, looking out at the stars. She was 32 years old, a diplomat like her great-grandfather Marcus had been. She wore the symbol of her office, a pin shaped like 2 planets orbiting each other, Earth and Sanctuary Prime. Beside her stood a Velcari named Lasting Light. They were the great-grandchild of Shimmering Tide, though such relationships were different for their species. Their inner glow was bright and steady, the color that Velcari showed when they were at peace. Below them, ships moved between stations. There were human vessels and Velcari vessels, but there were also ships from species that had never worked together before the Sanctuary Prime operation. The galaxy had changed in the 50 years since that day. Elena remembered growing up with stories about her great-grandfather. He had died when she was young, but she remembered his hands, the way they shook when he talked about the 72 hours. She remembered the way he cried when he spoke about Crystalline Dawn, the Velcari scientist who had sacrificed herself to save the resonance array. Now Elena was preparing to give a speech to the Galactic Concord. It was the anniversary of the operation's success. Representatives from 300 species would be listening. She was terrified. Lasting Light made the sound that meant gentle encouragement. They said Elena would do fine. They said her family had a gift for speaking to crowds. Elena smiled. She said that was easy for Lasting Light to say. Their ancestor had not had to follow in Marcus Chun's footsteps. Lasting Light made the sound that meant amusement. They said their ancestor Shimmering Tide had spent the rest of their life teaching other Velcari to think like humans. They said that was perhaps even harder. They walked together through the station corridors. Everywhere they went, Elena saw signs of how the galaxy had changed. A group of young beings from 5 different species sat together, laughing at something on a display screen. A Kathrani merchant argued cheerfully with a human customer about the price of mineral samples. A Moorish scientist floated beside a Velcari colleague, their different forms of communication somehow working together. This was normal now. This was just how things were. But it had not always been so. Elena knew the history. Before the Sanctuary Prime operation, the galaxy had been a collection of separate species living near each other, but not with each other. They traded and talked and sometimes fought, but they did not see themselves as connected. When one species faced extinction, others offered sympathy, but not sacrifice. What humanity did had changed that the elder species had not understood at first. They had called it irrational. They had called it wasteful. They had said that no logical civilization would spend so many resources, lose so many lives, for another species that could not even pay them back. Humanity had not cared about payment. Humanity had cared about debt. And the galaxy had slowly learned that debt was not about transactions. It was about connection. In the years after the operation, the philosophy had spread. The Velcari, transformed by their experience, became advocates for what they called the new binding. They said that the galaxy's species were not just neighbors. They were family. They had obligations to each other that went beyond calculation. Other species listened. Some agreed. Some argued. But everywhere, the conversation changed. When the Moorish home system faced an asteroid threat, 16 species sent ships to help. When a disease struck the Kathrani, human and Velcari doctors traveled for months to deliver treatment. When a young species on the edge of known space sent their first message to the stars, they were welcomed not by one species, but by many. The galaxy was learning to think like humans. Elena reached the great chamber of the Concord. It was vast, designed to hold representatives from every known species. Today it was full. Beings of every shape and size and method of existence waited to hear what she would say. She stepped up to the speaking platform. The chamber fell silent. Elena looked out at the crowd. She saw humans and Velcari sitting side by side. She saw Kathrani and Moorish and elders and dozens of species she had only read about in books. She saw the galaxy, united in a way that would have seemed impossible a century ago. She took a breath and began to speak. She told them about her great-grandfather Marcus. She told them about his grandmother, who had been carried through the poison smoke of Jakarta by a Velcari medic. She told them about the chain of kindness that connected those moments to this one. She told them about the operation. She told them about the drilling and the chaos and the jazz music that somehow worked when nothing else did. She told them about Sophia Reyes drilling through active blight territory to rescue strangers. She told them about Crystalline Dawn speaking English in her final moments, saying "see you on the other side." She told them about the cost. 1,847 humans, 423 Velcari, 112 others, each name carved into the memorial crystals that now stood at every drilling site on Sanctuary Prime, each sacrifice remembered. Then she told them what it meant. She said that 50 years ago, the galaxy believed that some things were impossible. They believed that extinction was inevitable. They believed that species could feel sorry for each other, but not die for each other. Humanity had proven them wrong, not because humans were special, not because humans were better or stronger or smarter than anyone else, but because humans had learned something important long ago. On a dying planet with poisoned skies, they had learned that someone willing to help you when you cannot help yourself is the most precious thing in the universe. The Velcari had helped humanity once. They had asked for nothing in return. They had simply seen suffering and chosen to end it. And when the time came, humanity had done the same thing. Alana paused. The chamber was completely silent. She said that debt was a strange word. It made people think of money, of transactions, of things owed and things paid. But that was not what debt really meant. Debt meant connection. Debt meant that what happened to one species mattered to another. Debt meant that when someone helped you, you carried a piece of them with you forever. And when you helped someone else, you passed that piece along. She said the Velcari had given humanity a gift 50 years ago. Not technology, not knowledge. Something more important. They had given humanity a chance to be good. Humanity had taken that chance. They had risked everything. They had lost people they loved. And they had saved a world. Now the galaxy was different. Species that had never spoken to each other were working together. Problems that had seemed impossible were being solved. The universe was becoming a place where no one had to face extinction alone. Elena looked at Lasting Light, standing at the edge of the chamber. The Velcari's glow was bright with emotion. Elena said that her great-grandfather had told her something before he died. He had said that the best thing about humans was not their strength or their cleverness or their stubborn refusal to give up. The best thing about humans was that they remembered. They remembered who helped them. They remembered who stood by them in the darkness. And they spent the rest of their lives trying to be worthy of that help. Elena said the galaxy was learning to remember, too. She stepped back from the platform. The chamber erupted in sound, every species expressing approval in their own way. Humans applauded. Velcari brightened. Kathrani clicked. Murish swirled. Later, when the ceremony was over, Elena walked with Lasting Light to a viewing port that looked out on both Earth and Sanctuary Prime. The two planets hung in the darkness, blue and silver, connected by a stream of ships traveling in both directions. Lasting Light asked Elena if she thought her great-grandfather would be proud. Elena watched the ships move between the worlds. Humans going to Sanctuary Prime, Velcari coming to Earth, families and friends and colleagues, their lives intertwined in ways that had seemed impossible before. She said she thought he would be surprised. He had just wanted to pay back a debt. He had never imagined that the payment would transform the entire galaxy. Lasting Light made the sound that meant wisdom. They said that was how the best transformations happened. Not through grand plans, but through simple acts of kindness that spread further than anyone expected. Elena nodded. She thought about her grandmother Lynn, carried through the smoke by a Velcari medic. She thought about the thousands who had died to save Sanctuary Prime. She thought about all the connections that had grown from those moments. They had aided humanity once, and humanity had repaid the debt in ways that transformed everything. But the truth was, the transformation was not over. It was still spreading, still growing, still changing the galaxy, one act of kindness at a time. Elena smiled and watched the ships fly between the stars. The debt would never truly be repaid. But that was okay, Todd. That was the whole point. The countdown began at midnight. Marcus watched from the orbital command center as 12,000 green lights appeared on the holographic display. Each light was a drilling site. Each site had a team of humans, Velcari, and others standing ready. Each team knew that the next 72 hours would decide everything. Ambassador Tanaka stood beside him. She was 103 years old now, kept alive by Velcari medical technology that she had refused for years before her staff insisted. Her eyes were fixed on the display. Her hands were clasped behind her back. She looked calm, but Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders. She said it was time. Marcus gave the order. Across the planet, 12,000 sites activated at once. Thermal siphons began pumping heat from the planet's core. Speakers began broadcasting discordant frequencies into the depths. The ground began to shake. From orbit, they could see the effect immediately. The planet's surface rippled with earthquakes. Velcari cities, already evacuated, cracked and crumbled. Mountains split open. Oceans churned with sudden currents. The hollow blight felt the attack and began to fight back. Crystal formations erupted from the ground at sites across the planet. Tendrils of living mineral shot up from the depths, targeting drilling equipment and workers. The teams fought back with everything they had. They used cutting lasers and explosives. They used the thermal siphons as weapons, flooding blight tendrils with cold. They kept the music playing, the chaotic jazz that seemed to confuse the organism. Hour 6, all sites still operational. Casualties minimal. The thermal siphons were working. Deep scans showed the planet's core temperature dropping. Hour 12. The blight adapted. It began growing faster, trying to overwhelm the siphons with sheer mass. 3 sites went offline. Teams worked desperately to restore them. Hour 18. 7 sites down. 43 dead. The blight was learning. Marcus worked without sleep. He coordinated repair teams, rerouted power, adjusted frequencies. Around him, scientists from a dozen species did the same. Nobody talked about the odds anymore. Nobody had time. Hour 24. The blight changed tactics. Instead of attacking the surface sites, it began targeting the underground equipment. Crystal formations grew around the thermal siphons, choking them. 12 more sites went offline. Human strike teams volunteered to go underground. They rappelled into active blight zones, cutting through crystal to reach trapped equipment. Many of them did not come back. Hour 30. A Velcari scientist named Crystalline Dawn noticed a problem with the main resonance array. The central broadcaster that coordinated all the disruptive frequencies was failing. If it went offline, the blight would adapt to the frequencies within hours. Everything would be lost. The array was located deep underground, in a chamber that was now surrounded by active blight growth. Repair teams could not reach it in time. Remote systems could not fix the damage. Crystalline Dawn said she would go. She was old, even by Velcari standards. She had lived for 900 years. She had seen her people discover and explore 100 worlds. She had watched them slowly accept their own extinction. And she had watched humans arrive and refuse to accept it. She told Marcus that she had lived long enough. She said it was time to do something worth dying for. Marcus tried to argue. He said there had to be another way. He said they could not ask her to sacrifice herself. Crystalline Dawn made the sound that meant gentle amusement. She said nobody was asking. She said she was choosing. Then she said something in English, a phrase she had learned from the human workers. See you on the other side. She descended into the blight zone. Her communication stayed active for 47 minutes. She narrated her journey, describing the crystal formations around her, the strange beauty of the blight, the heat and the cold mixing in waves. She reached the resonance array. She began repairs. The blight found her. Her last transmission was calm. She said the repairs were complete. She said the array would hold. She said she was glad to have known humanity. Then there was silence. Marcus stood in the command center, tears running down his face. Around him, humans and Velcari and others wept together. But they did not stop working. They could not stop. Crystalline Dawn had given them a chance. They would not waste it. Hour 44. The resonance array came back online at full power. The blight's adaptation slowed. The thermal siphons began making real progress. Hour 50. The deep scan showed something nobody had dared to hope for. The blight's growth was stopping. In some areas, it was actually retreating. Hour 58. 27 sites were down. The blight was weakening but still dangerous. Teams were exhausted. Supplies were running low. But they kept going. Hour 64. A massive blight surge erupted in the southern hemisphere. It overwhelmed 3 sites in minutes, killing everyone on the ground. The attack threatened to destroy the thermal siphon network in the entire region. A Kathrani engineer named Warrior 7 led a team of volunteers into the surge. They were miners from a dozen species, armed with cutting tools and explosives. They fought the blight hand to tendril for 6 hours, buying time for the network to stabilize. When the rescue teams finally reached them, only Warrior 7 was still alive. They had lost 3 of their 6 legs and most of their armor. But they were smiling in the way their species smiled. They said it had been a good fight. Hour 70. Marcus watched the probability calculations change on the display. 12% became 34%. 34% became 51%. For the first time, success was more likely than failure. The galaxy was watching. The Galactic Concord had broadcast the operation to every inhabited world. Billions of beings from hundreds of species sat before their screens, watching the numbers change. Hour 71. The thermal siphons reached critical absorption. The planet's core temperature was dropping faster than the blight could compensate. Deep scans showed the crystal organism beginning to fracture. Hour 72. The resonance array fired its final pulse. 12,000 sites broadcast their disruptive frequencies at maximum power. The planet itself seemed to ring like a bell. Then silence. Marcus stared at the displays. The blight signatures were gone. Not retreating. Not adapting. Gone. The crystal organism that had been killing Sanctuary Prime for 3 centuries had shattered into dust. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then, from deep within the planet, sensors detected something. A sound, a vibration. The natural harmonic of a healthy planetary core, beating like a heart for the first time in 300 years. The command center erupted. Humans screamed and hugged each other. Velcari lights flared bright enough to hurt the eyes. Kathrani clicked their armor in celebration. Moorish beings swirled in joyous patterns. Ambassador Tanaka stood amid the chaos, tears streaming down her weathered face. She had been 12 years old when the Velcari saved her world. Now she had watched humanity return the favor. Marcus found shimmering tide in the crowd. The Velcari was glowing brighter than Marcus had ever seen. They said they had not believed it was possible. They said they had prepared themselves for death. They said they did not know how to live anymore. Marcus put his hand on their shoulder. He said they would figure it out together. The casualty reports came in over the following hours. 1,847 humans had died. 423 Velcari. 112 volunteers from other species. Each name was recorded. Each sacrifice was remembered. But Sanctuary Prime was alive. Against all odds, against all logic, against everything the galaxy had believed was possible, the planet would survive. Marcus stood at a window, watching the first natural sunrise in 50 years break over the horizon. The sky was clear. The ground was still. Shimmering tides stood beside him. They said their people had a tradition. When someone saved a life, they were bound to that person forever. They said humanity had saved billions of lives today. They said the Velcari would remember this forever. Marcus watched the sun rise over a living world. He said humanity would remember too,